Language is a cornerstone of education, functioning both as a medium of communication and as the foundation for constructing and sharing knowledge. Today, language education has become increasingly attentive to the complexities of teaching in multilingual settings. English has gained prominence as the global medium of instruction due to its role as a lingua franca. Yet learners whose first language is not English often struggle to achieve proficiency. Factors such as limited exposure to authentic language use, uneven prior training, and the influence of local languages further complicate the process of mastering English in formal education. The 2022 PISA results placed the Philippines 76 out of 81 countries in reading, showing Filipino students lag 5 to 6 years behind top performers. To address this gap, code switching, shifting between English and the first language, has been identified as an effective teaching strategy. A 2024 study in the Philippines found that code switching is widely used by teachers and helps clarify lessons, boost engagement, and improve classroom communication. With this in mind, our group decided to find out more through a Capstone project which focuses on the use of code switching, the practice of alternating between English and the student's first language as a purposeful teaching strategy to help grade 11 learners at BELLE School of Fisheries overcome common difficulties in English learning.
Hello everyone, I am Nadine FRANZ CALAMIONG, and today I am going to report about the brief background of our Capstone project. Language is one of the most essential components of education, as it serves not only as a medium of communication, but also as the foundation for the exchange and construction of knowledge. In recent decades, the field of language education has recognized the growing complexity of teaching in multilingual contexts. Around the world, English has become a dominant medium of instruction due to globalization and its status as a lingua franca. However, for learners whose first language is not English, the process of acquiring proficiency is often fraught with challenges. Limited exposure to authentic English use, varying levels of prior language training, and the influence of local languages all contribute to the difficulty of mastering English in formal education settings. In multilingual countries such as our country, the Philippines, the classroom is a microcosm of linguistic diversity. Filipino learners are exposed to multiple languages in their daily lives, most commonly the local mother tongue, Filipino, and English. While the Department of Education implements English as a medium of instruction for many subjects, students, or I should say learners, often struggle with comprehension when lessons are conducted slowly or solely in English. This challenge has encouraged teachers to adopt strategies that balance English instructions with the linguistic realities of their learners. One such strategy is what we call the code switching. This refers to the deliberate alternation between two or more languages within a single discourse. Globally, code switching has been examined as both a natural linguistic phenomenon and a pedagogical tool. Studies suggest that when teachers switch between the learner's native language and English, it helps bridge gaps in understanding, clarifying instructions, and it will reduce anxiety associated with second language learning. In multilingual classrooms, code switching can create a more inclusive learning environment by allowing students to access content without being hindered by language barriers. It can also encourage active participation and develop stronger teacher student rapport. Nevertheless, the practice of code switching remains contested. Some scholars argue that frequent use of the first language in English classrooms will or may reduce learners' opportunities to be immersed in the target language, potentially slowing their acquisition of fluency. Others, however, contend that rather than hindering learning, Code switching provides a necessary scaffold, particularly for learners who are still developing foundational skills in English. The ongoing debate highlights the need for more empirical studies that evaluate the effectiveness of code switching in relation to specific outcomes such as comprehension, engagement, and overall language acquisition. In the Philippine context, where linguistic diversity is both a challenge and a resource, examining the impact of code switching is especially significant. Multilingual classrooms present unique opportunities to understand how students navigate between languages and how teachers can maximize this dynamic to promote English learning. By investigating the role of code switching as a teaching strategy, this study seeks to determine its influence on learners' comprehension, participation, and language development. Ultimately, the findings aim to contribute to the discourse on effective instructional strategies that address the realities of multilingual education while supporting the goal of English proficiency.
Filipino students are multilingual, speaking their local mother tongue, Filipino, and English. However, many still struggle when English is used as the sole medium of instruction. Now, according to the 2022 PISA results, the Philippines ranked 76th out of 81 countries in reading, with Filipino students performing about 5 to 6 years behind their peers in top performing nations. Then, a 2024 study titled Code Switching Practices of Junior High School Teachers and Learners in ESL Classes surveyed 33 teachers and 356 students in the Philippines, highlighting the role of language mixing in classroom communication. Language instruction should therefore acknowledge and adapt to the linguistic realities of learners. Meanwhile, Al-Dalbahi in 2022, in the relationship between code switching and level of language proficiency conducted in Saudi Arabia, found correlations between specific types of code switching and reduced second language proficiency. By examining the role of code switching in teaching English to grade 11 students at Binmali School of Fisheries, this study aims to reconcile differing perspectives and provide evidence that addresses issues raised in relation to DepEd's language policies.
Everyone, I am ABILLANOSA and I will be presenting to you the legal framework of our study. So this study is anchored in the following laws, policies, and official assurances that support the conduct of educational research, as well as this will guide the use of language in Philippine classrooms. The first law that we have is the 1987 Philippine Constitution, Article 14, Sections 6 and 7, wherein it recognizes Filipino as a national language while allowing English as an official language for communication and instruction. These support the study's investigation of code switching between English, Filipino, and local dialects as a valid pedagogical approach. The second law that we have is the Republic Act number 10533, or the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, or the K-12 law, where it emphasized learner-centered and context-sensitive teaching strategies. It mandates mother tongue-based multilingual education, or the MTB-MLE, from kindergarten to grade 3, highlighting the importance of the first language in strengthening understanding and building foundations for learning English. The third official policy that we have is the DepEd Order number 74, series of 2009, institutionalizing mother tongue-based multilingual education, wherein it directs the use of learners' mother tongue as the primary medium of instruction in the early grades. And it also encourages strategies that support comprehension in higher levels. Our study, Code Switching, aligns with this policy as it bridges the gap between learners' first language and English. And the fourth policy that I am going to discuss to you with is the DepEd Order number 16, series of 2012. It is the guidelines on MTB, MLE, or the mother tongue-based multilingual education implementation. It highlights that the use of the mother tongue facilitates learning both content in a second language. This strengthens the rationale for examining code switching as a scaffold in English learning.
Now, aside from that, we also have the RA 7722, also known as the Higher Education Act of 1994. As researchers, we are authorized under the RA 7722 to explore and implement innovative teaching strategies that enhance learning outcomes. This law empowers us to conduct research on code switching as a teaching strategy, as it promotes quality instruction and supports academic initiatives that promote and improve English language proficiency in multilingual classrooms. Through this act, our research is recognized as a legitimate contribution to educational development and policy improvement. Next, we also have the RA 10173, also known as the Data Privacy Act of 2012. In undertaking this study, we are legally bound by the Data Privacy Act to ensure the confidentiality and ethical handling of student information. This law requires us to protect learners' personal and academic data gathered during our investigation of code switching. By complying with this act, we guarantee that all data collected will be used solely for academic purposes, ensuring the privacy and rights of our participants throughout the research process. Next, we also have the DepEd Order number 40, series of 2012, also known as the Child Protection Policy. As researchers working with students in multilingual classrooms, we are guided by this policy to ensure that our research activities do not harm or discriminate against learners. This policy supports our implementation of code switching strategies by emphasizing inclusivity and respect for linguistic diversity. It ensures that our study promotes student welfare and protects their rights while exploring the impact of code switching on English language learning. Now, the last one, we've got the RA 4670, or the Magna Carta for public school teachers. This law upholds the rights of teachers, including the freedom to apply instructional strategies that address the needs of diverse learners. As researchers, of course, we align with this act by validating code switching as a pedagogical choice that teachers can legally and professionally employ. It supports our research objective to examine code switching as an effective method to enhance English language learning in multilingual classrooms, reinforcing teacher autonomy and instructional innovation. These legal frameworks collectively authorize and protect our role as researchers in exploring code switching as a strategic teaching approach. They ensure that our research is educationally relevant, ethically sound, learner centered, and legally supported within the Philippine educational system.
Let us now move on to the project description of our study. This part presents the focus, rationale, purpose, design, intervention, and expected outcomes of our research. Our study focuses on the use of code switching, or the practice of alternating between English and Filipino, or the local dialect during instruction. We aim to help grade 11 students who often find English lessons challenging by exploring how code switching can make learning easier and more engaging. In multilingual classrooms like ours, students often rely on Filipino or their local dialect to understand lessons. While this makes them comfortable, it can also limit their exposure to English, leading to struggles in comprehension, oral expression, and confidence. So, by using code switching strategically, teachers can explain lessons more clearly, make discussions more relatable, and encourage participation. This approach helps bridge the gap between understanding and confidence, allowing students to learn English in a more natural and supportive way. The main purpose of this study is to see how code switching can help students in three specific ways. First, to better understand new English concepts. Second, to participate more actively in classroom discussions. And the last one is to gain more confidence in using English both in speaking and in writing. We believe that using both English and Filipino appropriately can lead to a more inclusive and effective learning environment. For the research design, this study follows a classroom action research design using the plan, act, observe, reflect cycle. We combined both quantitative and qualitative methods to get a complete picture of the results. For the quantitative part, we use pre-test, post-test, and surveys to measure improvements in performance and attitudes. For the qualitative part, we conducted interviews and classroom observations to understand students' experiences and reactions during the intervention. For the intervention details, the intervention lasted for 4 weeks and focused on three key areas: the reading comprehension, grammar, and class discussions. During this time, teachers consistently use code switching when explaining lessons, giving instructions, and facilitating conversations. This allowed us to observe how it affected the students' engagement and understanding. For the expected outcomes, by the end of the study, we expect to see improvement in students' English comprehension, classroom participation, and overall confidence in using the language. We will compare their performance and attitudes before and after the intervention to determine the effectiveness of code switching. Ultimately, we hope to show that code switching, when used strategically, is not a sign of weakness, but rather a powerful tool that connects understanding, communication, and confidence in learning the English language.
Part 5. The significance of the project. This study is significant as it addresses the learning needs of grade 11 learners at Binmali School of Fisheries, many of whom are slow readers and from multilingual backgrounds. It explores code switching as a teaching strategy to improve comprehension, confidence, and classroom participation in English learning. Through purposeful alternation between English and the first language, the study aims to promote inclusivity, scaffold understanding, and create a supportive environment for developing English proficiency. Code switching as a teaching strategy, impact on English language learning in multilingual classrooms is significant. Number 1 for the students. This project helps grade 11 slow readers improve their comprehension and confidence by allowing them to use the first language to support English learning. It promotes inclusivity and encourages active participation in class. The study is significant. Number 2 for the English teachers. It provides teachers with framework for code switching as an evidence-based guide to balance English and Filipino use in class. This helps value students' linguistic backgrounds as learning assets. Number 3, the study is significant for the school administrators and parents. The study highlights the importance of learner-centered approach that respect linguistic diversity. Administrators may use the results to support flexible instructional practices, while parents or guardians can be assured that their children benefit from strategies that enhance comprehension and participation. Number 4 for the future researchers, curriculum developers, and policymakers, by contributing empirical data on the role of code switching in English language acquisition, the insight generated can inform curriculum design, teacher training programs, and language in education policies that align with the multilingual realities in the Philippine classroom.
Alright, so at this point, I'll be presenting the introduction to the project design of our capstone study. The project design serves as the blueprint of our study, and this part would outline how the entire project will be carried out, let's say from planning and implementation all the way to evaluation. And through this section, we will present how our group intends to apply the code switching strategy in the classroom, and at the same time monitor its effectiveness and of course evaluate its impact on students' learning. Alright, so the project design includes of course, we have the first one on the list, which is the proposed activities and features. We also have the mechanics or the step-by-step process. And of course, we also have the timeline of the implementation, as well as the financial requirements and resources. We also have the persons involved, as well as the instruments we'll use for the evaluation. We'll also discuss the expected outcomes of the study and of course present a SWOT analysis to show the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and of course possible challenges of our project. So overall, this part highlights the practical side of our research, or let's say how we will translate our objectives into actual classroom practice. Now, to give you a clearer view of each component, my group mates will discuss them one by one.
Hello everyone, I'm John Mark Tapiador. I will be discussing the project design, specifically the proposed activities and features of our capstone project. These activities were carefully structured to apply and assess the effectiveness of code switching as an instructional strategy in English classes. So let me walk you through each one. To begin with, there will be development of lesson plans with code switching strategies. Lesson plans will be created for different areas like reading, grammar, vocabulary, speaking, listening, and writing. And each lesson plan will integrate code switching techniques to ensure that lessons are both engaging and understandable. These will also be checked to make sure that they align with the DepEd learning competencies. Now that the lessons are ready, we need to understand where our students currently stand. Therefore, a diagnostic assessment, which is a pre-test, will then be given to measure a student's initial proficiency in grammar, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. And this step helps to establish a baseline for a comparison later on. And once we know their starting point, we can now apply the strategy and observe how it supports their learning. After which, the implementation of code switching in English lessons will be done. In this phase, code switching will be integrated into various English lessons. For example, in vocabulary, English words will be linked to their local equivalents. In reading, teachers will use bilingual prompts to clarify meaning. In grammar, side-by-side examples in English and the local language will simplify rules. Now, in speaking and listening, students can mix both languages at first and they can gradually move toward the use of English. And in writing, students may brainstorm in their first language before translating their ideas into English, and in that way, it will reduce their pressure. As these lessons are carried out, it's also important to continuously check how well students are responding. Therefore, there will be an ongoing monitoring and reflection, which serves as a formative assessment. Here, short quizzes, feedback forms, and classroom observations will be conducted to monitor students' progress and participation. Observation checklists will also be used to record engagement and confidence levels throughout the process. And after some time, we also need to see how much improvement has actually taken place. So a post-test, similar to the pre-test, will be administered. And this allows us to measure the students' growth in comprehension, grammar, vocabulary, speaking, and listening after using the code switching approach. But I also believe that assessment alone is not enough, right? We also need to know how students and teachers felt about the process. So there will be evaluation, feedback, and validation. Here, students and teachers will share their insights, experiences, and suggestions through surveys, focus group discussions, and of course, interviews. And once feedback is gathered, the next step is to analyze all the data and interpret the findings. So this is going to be done through data analysis and reporting. All test results, observations, and reflections will be analyzed together to provide a complete picture. And by comparing the pre-test and the post-test results, the study can determine how effective code switching was in improving English learning outcomes. Finally, after analyzing the data, it's also important to share what we have learned. So there will be dissemination of findings. Specifically, the results of the research capstone project will be presented to the school community, teachers, and stakeholders. In this way, the insights that we have gained can be used to guide future classroom strategies and promote more effective English instruction. So for this capstone project, each activity was designed to ensure that code switching is not just tested, but it is truly understood as a tool to make English learning more accessible, engaging, and effective for students.
So let's move forward to the mechanics of our study, the systematic process we followed in implementing and evaluating the code switching strategy to enhance English learning among grade 11 students. So to begin, we started with lesson planning. We developed code switching based lesson plans that were aligned with the Department of Education's English learning competencies. This ensured that our instruction remained consistent, relevant, and curriculum based. So next is we conducted a pre-implementation assessment. We administered diagnostic pre-tests to measure students' initial proficiency in key language areas: reading, grammar, vocabulary, speaking, and listening. So at the same time, we carried out initial classroom observation to gauge their participation and confidence in using English before the intervention began. And after gathering baseline data, we move on to the 4-week intervention period. So during this stage, we taught English lessons using the code switching strategy across various domains, including vocabulary, grammar, reading, writing, and oral communication. We also conducted formative assessments, such as quizzes, feedback, surveys to monitor progress. Additionally, we used observation checklists to record students' engagement and participation throughout the sessions. Following the intervention, we carried out a post-assessment. So a post-test similar to the pre-test was administered to measure improvements in proficiency and confidence. We also collected qualitative feedback through student surveys, focus group discussions, and teacher interviews to understand their perceptions, experiences, and challenges with the code switching strategy. Finally, we conducted data analysis and reporting. We analyzed both quantitative data, such as pre-test and post-test scores, and qualitative data from observations and interviews. By triangulating these results, we were able to determine the overall effectiveness of code switching in improving English learning. So the findings, conclusions, and recommendations will then be shared with the school community, faculty, and stakeholders to help inform future instructional practices. And in summary, our mechanics ensured that each phase of the research, from planning, implementation, to evaluation, was systematic, evidence-based, and aligned with educational standards. So through this process, we aim to provide meaningful insights into how code switching can support English language learning among senior high school students.
Our study was conducted over a 4-week period, covering preparation, implementation, and evaluation phases. In week 1, we focused on preparation and baseline assessment. We developed lesson plans aligned with DepEd English competencies, administered a diagnostic pre-test, and conducted initial classroom observations to assess students' participation in confidence in using English. In week 2, we begin the first part of the implementation, focusing on vocabulary and reading lessons. Students were introduced to new English words with first language equivalents and bilingual reading prompts. We also conducted formative assessments and monitored engagement through observation checklists. In week 3, we continued the implementation with grammar, speaking, listening, and writing lessons.
Activities such as role plays, dialogues, and writing exercises encourage students to express themselves in English with the help of our local language. Ongoing monitoring through quizzes and reflection logs was also done. In week 4, we conducted the post-test and evaluation to measure improvements in English proficiency. We gathered qualitative feedback through surveys and interviews, then analyzed the data to interpret both quantitative and qualitative results. Finally, we presented our findings and recommendations to the faculty and stakeholders. In summary, our 4-week timeline ensured a structured and systematic approach that allowed us to effectively assess how code switching supports students' English language learning and confidence.
Good day, esteemed panelists, teachers, and fellow researchers. We are here to present the financial requirements and resources for our action research. To ensure the successful conduct of our study, we have prepared a detailed budget plan that outlines the estimated expenses for all research activities and material. First, under pre-test and post-test materials, we have allocated funds for the photocopying and printing of test papers for participants, and this item amounts to 500 pesos in total. Next, for the survey questionnaires, we printed 50 sets of survey forms at a unit cost of 10 pesos per set, totaling to 500 pesos. Under interview materials, we printed 50 sets of interview guides and consent forms at 10 pesos each, amounting to 500 pesos. For the classroom observations, we printed 30 copies of observation checklists, forms, and rubrics at 5 pesos each, with a total cost of 150 pesos.
Hello everyone, I'm MELIDA DUCAY. Let me continue the financial requirements and resources in our research. In terms of writing and documentation supplies such as bond paper, ink, pens, and folders, we have set aside a total of 700 pesos to support data organization and report preparation. Next, we have also included recording devices which are necessary for accurate data gathering during interviews and observations. A total of 500 pesos has been allotted for this item. Next, for transportation allowance, which will cover travel expenses during data gathering and fieldwork, we have allocated a lump sum of 800 pesos. Next, to express gratitude and appreciation to our respondents, we have set aside 2,500 for tokens of appreciation given during surveys and interviews.
Under data analysis materials and software, we allotted 1,200 pesos for printing the results and for possible subscription to data analysis software such as SPSS or MVivo. Finally, we have a contingency fund amounting to 500 pesos, which represents approximately 5 to 10% of the total budget intended for any unforeseen or additional expenses that may arise during the conduct of the study. Overall, the estimated total cost for this research is 7,500 pesos. This budget plan ensures that all research activities, from data gathering and analysis to reporting, will be adequately supported, allowing the study to be conducted efficiently, ethically, and within the planned timeframe.
Hello everyone, I'm SHERLYN and MANECLANG, and I will be presenting to you the persons involved in this study. So the primary persons involved in this study are the researcher, the grade 11 learners of Binmalay School of Fisheries, and the English teacher. So the first one is the researcher. The researcher is responsible for designing the study, preparing and validating research instruments, implementing the code switching intervention, and analyzing the data collected. The researcher ensures that the intervention is properly planned. So the role guarantees the credibility of the action, research, or the study. The next one is the grade 11 learners. The grade 11 learners identified as slow readers and coming from multilingual backgrounds serve as the main participants in the study. They are involved in the pre-test, post-test, surveys, classroom sessions, and selected interviews or focus group discussions. So here, their performance and feedback provide the actual data needed to measure whether the code switching is effective. Without their involvement, the research questions cannot be answered. Next is the parents or guardians. Parents or guardians may also be consulted to provide consent for their children's participation. So, parental consent upholds the ethical standards, protecting the learner's rights and transparency. And the next one is the school administrators. The school administrators are involved by granting permission and supporting the implementation of the research within the school setting. So their permission also lends to authority and the legitimacy of the study. Next is the English teachers. The English teacher, who may also be the researcher, plays a key role in applying the code switching strategy during English instruction. So this ensures that the strategy is tested under the authentic teaching learning conditions, so making the results more valid and applicable to actual practice. And the last one is they are not the direct participants, but they will benefit from the findings. So the future researchers, curriculum developers, and education policy makers. The findings of this study may be used to inform teaching practices and language instruction policies in multilingual classroom. So, by sharing results, future researchers gain reference material and curriculum developers get insights for instructional design, and the policymakers are informed about the strategies effective in multilingual settings. So those are the persons involved in our study.
This project will employ three primary instruments to gather data on the impact of code switching as a teaching strategy in multilingual classrooms. First, a pre-test and post-test will be administered to measure students' level of comprehension and proficiency in English before and after the intervention. The test consists of teacher-made items that were aligned with learning competencies in oral communication and reading comprehension. The comparison of scores will provide quantitative evidence of the effectiveness of code switching in enhancing English learning.
Second, we have classroom observation checklist. It will be used to document students' engagement, participation, and responsiveness during lessons when code switching will be applied. The checklist contains indicators of observable behaviors such as attentiveness, frequency of participation, and the ability to respond appropriately when a teacher shifts between English and the mother tongue. The instrument will serve as a qualitative and quantitative tool for assessing classroom dynamics. Lastly, a teacher interview and focus group discussion. It will be conducted to gain insights from educators regarding their experiences and perceptions of using code switching in teaching English. A semi-structured interview will ensure consistency in the questions while allowing flexibility for participants to elaborate on their responses. This qualitative instrument provides contextual and experiential data to help explain and support the quantitative findings.
In our classroom, language don't compete, they collaborate. Today, I will show how plan code switching, shifting between English and learners' home languages can accelerate comprehension, participation, and confidence. This is not giving up on English, it's building a bridge to English. Our goal is strategic code switching, short, intentional, and data-driven. We use it to clarify key ideas, model accurate English, and value learners' identities. Now, Let's move on to the learning outcomes of the implementation of this instruction in our classroom. First, it improved reading comprehension. By using code switching strategically, we can help students understand English text more effectively. For example, when introducing new or complex vocabulary, we can give a quick explanation in the student's first language, then immediately return to English. This short support helps learners make sense of ideas without feeling lost. As a result, their reading comprehension improves, and they can focus more on analyzing the text rather than getting stuck on unfamiliar words. So, it improved their reading comprehension. Second, it increased classroom participation. Code switching also encourage more active participation. When students are allowed brief use of their first language during brainstorming or group tasks, they can express ideas more confidently. This lowers their hesitation and helps them prepare clearer answers in English. Gradually, they become more comfortable speaking up during discussion, group work, and interactive activities. So, it increased classroom participation in using code switching during our class discussion. And third, enhance confidence in English communication. Using strategic code switching builds learners' confidence. When students know they can use their first language as a stepping stone in learning English, they feel less pressure and more willing to try. Speaking or writing in English, and over time, as their skills improve, we reduce code switching and encourage them to communicate fully in English, helping them become more self-assured in both oral and written communication. Therefore, using code switching can truly help our learners to learn effectively the English language.
So here is the number 4 expected outcomes. So we have the positive perceptions of code switching. So surveys and interviews are expected to show that students generally view code switching in a positive light. They are likely to describe it as both helpful in understanding lessons and motivating because it boosts their confidence and encourages active participation in English learning. So we have also the practical insights for teachers. The study aims to provide teachers with clear guidance on how to use code switching effectively. Instead of switching languages randomly, teachers will learn when and how to apply it deliberately and purposely so it enhances learning without reducing exposure to English. And also we have the policy and institutional relevance. The findings may help school administrators and policymakers improve language instruction policies. It can also serve as basis for teachers' training programs, ensuring educators are equipped with strategies for teaching in multilingual classrooms. And lastly, we have the contribution to educational research. This research will add valuable insights to the existing literature on multilingual education. It will not only strengthen the academic discussion on code switching but also serve as reference for future studies in language learning and teaching strategies. So in short, the study is expected to show that students appreciate code switching, provide teachers with strategies on how to use it well, guide policymakers in improving language education, and contribute new knowledge to the field of multilingual education.
Good day, everyone. My name is Angelica Toralba. For my part of the presentation, I will be discussing the SWOT analysis of our study. So basically, I will be presenting the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that we foresee in conducting this research. Let me begin with the strength of our study. First, according to Commons, knowledge from the first language can be transferred to the second. For example, when the teacher explained the word resilient by connecting it to the Filipino word matatag, a student quickly understood and remembered it. This shows that the first language can serve as a bridge toward learning English. Number 2, code switching increases participation. In English-only classes, only high-performing students often speak up. But when instructions are briefly clarified in Filipino, like in the task about identifying scarcity, more students become confident to answer. Third, it also helped to reduce anxiety because many students avoid eye contact during grammar lessons. But the short switch to Filipino clarifies instructions and allows them to accomplish tasks they once thought were impossible. Lastly, our mixed method design is a strength. The quantitative side, which include test and service, shows measurable improvement, while the qualitative side, which include interviews and observations, reveal students' real experiences. So together, this gives us a complete picture of the impact of code switching. Now, let us move on to the weaknesses that we foresee in our study. First, our research may only capture the immediate impact of code switching since it will run for just 4 weeks. This means we can show short-term improvements in comprehension or participation, but we cannot confirm if these gains will last in the long run. Second, students may become too dependent if code switching is overused. Instead of figuring out meaning through context clues, our grammar, some might just wait for the Filipino translation. This could limit the development of higher order thinking skills, which are important for English learning. Third, our study has a limited scope. Since it will be done in one grade level and one school, the result cannot be confidently generalized to all multilingual classrooms in the Philippines. Lastly, the strategy itself requires careful and strategic application. If every instruction is always translated, students might ignore the English version and just rely on Filipino. That's why teachers must use it with balance, not as a crutch but a scaffold for learning. Now for the opportunities, first, if evidence shows that code switching improves comprehension and participation, it can be recommended in classrooms, even in a school that enforces English-only policies. This could give teachers the flexibility to clarify concepts without leaving students behind. Second, our research may also guide teacher training. Then, third, this study can serve as a foundation for future research since our scope is limited to one grade level. So other researchers may build on our work and apply code switching in different levels, subjects, or regions in the Philippines. Finally, let me present the threats that we foresee in our study. First, some schools still enforce strict English-only policy. Administrators believe that even if students do not understand it right away, exposure to English will benefit them in the future. This mindset leaves little room for code switching. Second, government policies can also discourage its use. While Republic Act No. 10533 promoted mother tongue-based education, the new RA 12027 made it optional, which creates a mindset that using the first language is less important or less professional. Third, some parents may also resist. They may think that using Filipino in English classes lower the standard of teaching, without realizing that it can be used strategically to support learning. And lastly, code switching does not affect all students equally. While some become more confident and engaged, Others may remain dependent on their first language and show little progress in English proficiency. In conclusion, our SWOT analysis shows that while code switching presents clear strengths and promising opportunities, it also carries weaknesses and threats that reminds us it must be applied with balance and care.
Mm-hmm.